Canada, Canada should significantly increase development of logistics for the Alaskan Arctic, conditional engagement in the United States and the United States federal government increasing its development of logistics for the Alaskan Arctic. It solves and submits Canadian middle power diplomacy bonder and 19 Canadians are elected by the U.S. front and center. IJC handle and distributing Canada, U.S. not first time Canada will protect America one off product Canada give it up. Like policy along the same lines, the U.S. agreements achieve. We put everything on the table. Canada's national security, moral, and global stage defined by the U.S. We need re-example bilateral relations that prevents breakdown of multilateral institutions, extinction, Crane 18, re-break multilateral. We need strengthen Canada, the oldest breakdown through multilateral. We avert wars, nuclear crises, terror, cyber pandemics, food, migration, and climate. Multilateral take the world to the brink of breakdown. Canada can strengthen the influence given history, multilateral creation of institutions becoming a voice for governments to be foreign policy. Let's be a multilateral will not solve problems that threaten the world. Extinction K. Invoking extinction is the settle trip allows colonialism to recuperate and to authorize genocide. Vote neg to reject it. Dally and 16 settlers living conflict. Extinction is perception of struggle juxtaposed against peace. Never reach extinction is a narrative of offers settlers to disavow violence of origins. While settlers have been the most privileged, they routinely perceive themselves under siege. Whiteness born and the fear of annihilation. Narrative of extinction obscured inequalities of the frontier behind white political lady court trope, which futurity emerges in our look. It exists not in cycle season, but catastrophe will not thought preoccupies America not how to die to prolong its arrogance. Extinction become uncontemplated with resignation. Putin politics is said. U.S. leadership causes status now in the Arctic collapses. Putin regime Elmore in 21. Moscow historically used Arctic as nationalist legitimation, propaganda, introduction, and celebrity patriotism, and tech for hostile motives of growth. Why has Moscow chosen the Arctic counter-advances for Putin to face internal threats versus action to put the Arctic to bolster its authoritarian regime? Putin to stay in power. The Russian people must believe Russia successfully compete with the West of the Arctic as a sacred space of power to arrive. Russian readiness become central to this belief. Putin regime is stable now, but on the brink of collapse on Markov 24. On the surface, Putin regime appears stable, but Putin's gradual year ago, wholly independent of vengeance proposals, March or a mob storming Western national airport, new domestic and Russian political opposition Kremlin. On the brink of collapse, Russia may spiral out of control, triggering West swift ties of its regime instability leads to nuclear war, be civil war, economic decline, supply chain disruption, and separatism. Yap. In 25, Putin's powers maintained through small inner circle consultation powers, great system of the weak institution for and transition from the Russia's political structures, be magnetic to the departure of the leadership would be forced out or lack of succession to lead a Islamic common own power struggle to save like Russia, Russian risk, and internal governance to have a greater significant national repercussions, and to affect global markets, supply chain, and national security. Power struggles may embolden separatist movements in Chechnya, given Russia's nuclear arsenal, any prolonged political trigger regional security crisis, spillover effects in Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and broader international community. T minerals. Development is activity relating to the exploitation of resources. If exploitation refers to any activity related to the identification or evaluation of resource deposits, U.S. Code 90. Development means activity involving exploration and exploitation of resource deposits, including processing, storage, and transport. Exploration means the activity purpose is identification, evaluation of resource deposits, including drilling, dredging, drinks, excavation, termination, and size of deposit, feasibility of their development, vote, neg, limits, and ground. The alternative is do anything with or in the Arctic, exploiting the neg. Research burden spiking every day said. Russian relations is said. U.S.-Russia cooperation in the Arctic is high now, critical gateway to arms control back in 25. Arctic may be the key region for cooperation. Those has ability to express interest in cooperation, money, energy investment, and geopolitical issues. Efficiently, Arctic cooperation is a means to drive a wedge between Moscow and Beijing to plan to have diplomatic relations with simply reduce obstacles to scientific cooperation, new cooperation in the Arctic, build regional stability, and to spill over to arms control for increased U.S. presence in the Arctic. Shreds U.S.-Russia cooperation for R-17. Arctic cooperation will be threatened if change result in a large uptick in foreign activity around the NSR. Foreign presence of Russian concerns about sovereignty and encirclement more activity could lead to unintended conflicts. Russia give the react with force of the U.S. war to protect freedom of navigation. Another risk of miscommunication, misinterpretation, increased interaction, military actively driving escalation. A situation in which Russia perceives the threat to its influence, change provides leading Russia to suspend cooperation. Russia and displayed willingness to react with military force. Successful nuclear arms control snowballs into emerging tech. Char 22. Agreements are useful coordination mechanisms between states, even personally successful agreements improve stability throughout history. States regulate weapons that cause instability, key factors, crossing mirror threats, inducements, compel states to comply with arms control, essential agreements, clarity, sensibility, key. Despite a study of the Soviet Union, U.S. harder number of successful treaties, 2008 ban on cluster munitions was enabled by the successful ban on anti-personnel landmines, freezer, arms control treaties, and snowballing effect with successful agreements increasing future success. These factors influence the deniability of feasibility of arms control for British tech, including AI. Lack of arms control governs collapses global governance, rogue AI regulation, triggers miscalculation, extinction, Moody. In 22, arms control could become crucial for security and global governments failure to intensify combative structures with norms and institutions arms control contribute to a stable relation between powers and strengthening security by avoiding arms race that locks and miscalculating expenditure under controls and the interest of every party. Arms control garner support among politicians and arms control mitigate negative impacts of advanced emerging technology in the hands of terrorists. Arms control diminish miscalculations. The world is escape unintended war. Nothing's guaranteed. Expedition artificial challenge to punch the world and a devastating war by error. P3 Calvin. The United States federal government should abandon unilaterally increasing development of logistics for the Alaskan Arctic through federal action, devolve authority to increase development of logistics for the Alaskan Arctic to a specialized public-private partnership establishing a P3 ski off the case and Chorp CMR Pingeli 25. Immersion of industry and defense established the innovation of industry to create collaborative governance in PPP, introducing responsible coast of defense governance, promoting relation between industry, political, and military partners at the right tool because of knowledge, potential transformation, and strategies from one authority to multiple authorities. So I demonstrate direction, defense policy, required to promote coordination, urges institutions, consider an alternative opportunity for planning to be able to adjust to the unexpected situation Nation crisis requires institutionalization of PPE's role and functioning. CMR staves off new war, Asgard in 25 weeks, civilian control, and Greeks likelihood of combat to increase of voters, officers act with greater independence, have hawkish FOPO, military ethic and nature, amend per force with opponents violence and normal, encourage offensive wars, military leaders push for peaceful concession, exploit high levels of dissatisfaction, making use force more favorable, prevent negotiating Iraq and nukes to capabilities and civil control, determining conflict behavioral level, hawkish depends on civilian control, military function, positive order for nuclear commerce, and initiating how less likely to have a emboldening effect in states and surviving civilian control, a military less likely to use nuclear weapons as a shield. Deterrence advantage. 1. Either non-infrastructure all causes the logistics outweigh or the status quo solves. Judson in 23 efforts figuring out how to deploy troops from port to port in an environment where servers unable to travel freely without interference. AMC moving forward efforts to develop strategy focused areas on new capability industrial-based operational combat deployable formation for the first time since Command's beginning and integrating a new CFT focused on contested logistics. Army works out. It will focus specifically on the Indo-Pacific theater when ION fully fleshed and capable is modernized pre-position stocks firm, expanding the amount to potential for expanding location, maybe in smaller locations. 2. No Taiwan will prefer thoroughly consensus over one-off exaggeration about Saddle 24 invasion of Taiwan treated as a foregone conclusion. Predictions have become common courtesy overview all available forecasts to lower the risk low. China can be competent when which keeps down the risk alarm standards. Look at risk and isolation without consideration based low based on probability heavily exaggeration. Forecast still overestimating the right thing about Taiwan semiconductor industry destroying supply chain in China. Harder than West Taiwan competent proceed from low probability not win rather than if. 3. No Arctic war restraint cooperation defining rivalry factor make escalation miscalc impossible to check. In 24 researchers clear evidence about cooperative behavior Arctic combat predicted rivalry factor not decrease. No actors interest in escalating military growth. Not diversion from previous trend in communication uninterrupted Arctic show. Stability inherent in treaties strong enough to offset tension and militarization. COVID and COVID Ukraine reduces the common college companies that adhere to non-confrontational behavior, militarily factor, support non-escalation, in the region, persistent rhetoric, underlining cooperation, Arctic stable. 4. Thumbers, America first rhetoric and multilateral withdrawal stump the prolif impact. 5. Hegemony emboldens allies that makes prolif inevitable. Porter 19. Washington should exert discipline on allies. This is so especially in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, the OCID, and reinforce their position and condition on protection and threat of abandonment of critical ingredients, cultivation, reputation for limited reliability, ability to control escalation depends on its capacity to restrain third party establishing viable security features more house allies confident bolded them to behavior to agree on Japan could test alliance boundaries and because it takes them for granted their past aren't guaranteed. NATO could lead states to miscalculated behavior recklessly against Russian minorities. Logistics advantage. 1. Natural disasters are stabilizing Quebec and 15. Concept disaster diplomacy asserts disaster response can create positive chain victim countries without naturally reinforce inequalities and provide mechanisms of foster goodwill. Disaster may endanger some same sense of solidarity, shared experience can bridge existing divides. Humans are naturally inclined to cooperate when catastrophes strike. Humans have evolved to share limited resources during periods of scarcity. 2. No fish wars. PC 18. Yeah, I'll do it at the end. The claim that conflict over fish is likely is overly simplistic. Food insecurity does not lead to conflict. It's difficult to isolate political factors. Militarization, E and SCS is not to be due to fish. Securing trade routes is greater. Motivating factor Beijing unlikely to use military force just to gain access to fish. 3. Status quo solves and clean up its worst for oil spills. Box out. And 23. All equipment developed for oil spill removal consume clear sea servers. They did figure out how to spill under the CICS will be nothing. Ocean is full of oil-eating microbes. Oil seep in the sea floor, broken down in weeks in the open ocean. Best option is nature kicks in. Effort to clean up after Exxon caused more harm. Neg fiat is good. All right, I'm open.
Status of the off.
The status quo was always a logical option.
Topical apps under your interpretation.
Well, my lab is producing a high-quality Greenland app about minerals.
Raleigh Maxwell is producing an app.
Yes, that's
what
right.
Else?
There's plenty of apps about the deep seabed for mineral extraction. You can also mine in a lot of places. Alaska has some minerals.
U.S.
So
Code
lots of different
90,
apps.
the chapter you're reading your definition from is about Arctic exploration of minerals. Why is this a good definition for the topic?
We'll have a defense of predictability in the block if you are curious, but we think that because this portion of U.S. Code is defining 2 words in the resolution, then it is more predictable than any evidence that 2AC will produce.
Putin politics. You're reading 2021 uniqueness. In
Yeah.
June, there was like a new icebreaker seal. Why wouldn't this fall as
We'll read more specific evidence to a new
we have to
icebreaker
wait
seal,
for the surprise.
but the Elmore evidence says the U.S. lacks a stable presence in the Arctic, and our Samarokov evidence says that Putin's regime is stable now from 2024.
Okay.
So,
yeah, but this is
New
June
one-
2025.
right, sure, but we'll read answers to
Okay.
it.
Canada counterplan.
Right.
The net benefits about protectionist policies and Canada refuting those. Trump's sweeping tariffs, a huge protectionist policy for the United States. How come Canada's not preventing extinction?
Yeah, but the internal is about Canada asserting itself. We don't think in the score that Canada has asserted itself.
Carney
by-
met with Trump, and Trump said no. They asserted themselves. It failed. Why aren't we all dead?
Well, they haven't used leverage against the United States. The second plank of the counterplan says it would condition all engagement with the U.S. on the USFG doing the plan. That is sufficient leverage that would assert Canada's
kick
middle
planks?
power steps. We can kick planks on Canada, but not on P3.
Cool. P3, what is it?
It is a public-private partnership.
What is that?
It is an agreement between the government and companies in the private sector to do the plan.
What companies?
Any company.
What? So like,
Companies that specialize in, defense innovation. So you can probably guess a few.
no, I want you to tell me now.
Lockheed Martin is
Oh,
probably
okay.
my favorite one.
Cool. What does it mean to bolster authoritarianism?
To make it more, appealing to voters.
Okay, you have a card about bolstering authoritarianism in the Arctic.
Which
That's
card
key
is
for
this?
Putin politics, the
Oh, right,
impact
right.
card. What does that mean? Is that like prevent cooperation or something?
It just means that if Putin's regime is unstable, it leads to more authoritarianism because people become fearful.
Okay, so Putin politics says that people believe that Russia should compete in the Arctic.
Right.
Russia relations says that cooperation is high now. How is cooperation and competitive?
Well, cooperation doesn't necessarily mean that Putin is not taking a stance
Explain
in the
that
Arctic.
to me.
We think that if the aft, since it adopts a forward presence, it's key to power projection in the Arctic and deters all
Power
of Russia's
projection,
activities.
but then
that would be
cooperation's
bad.
also high now. Like,
Well, cooperation doesn't necessarily mean that Putin is not asserting his role in the Arctic.
okay.
Like the U.S. and Russia can cooperate in a way that benefits both nations. The aft would only hurt Russia.
I believe you all have received the 2AC.
Hold on. Okay.
Yo, be quiet so we can hear the order.
Will be deterrence, logistics, T minerals, the Canada counterplan, the PPE counterplan, the Russia politics DA, the Russia relations DA, the critique. I'll repeat that one time. Deterrence logistics, T minerals, the Canada counterplan, the PPE counterplan, the Russia politics DA, the Russia relations DA, and then the K. Are you all good?
Yep.
1NC1, logistics are failing. Underinvestment in supply, infrastructure, and transport threatens warfighting capabilities. That's Heiserman and Sullivan preferred. Their evidence is about the Indo-Pacific, not the Arctic. Our evidence postdates by 2 years, so it assumes new plans. The evidence describes 1NC2, Taiwan invasion outweighs logistical favors, ruin deterrence, A2A decentralization, contested supply chain, tech forward presence, that appear, that Greenlands, broader Pacific war with Korea, Japan, global recession, supply chain collapse, nuclear arms chasing, authoritarianism, and war in other theaters. That's Easton. Their evidence is China thinks it would be logistically difficult, but that's not true. As per our evidence, 1NC3, the Russia war is likely in the Arctic. Ukraine spills over to or offensive actions to open up a new front. Russia's revisionist, so current cooperation does not predict future peace. That's boiling. It causes nuclear probing and modernization. WMS, anti-satellites, and hypersonics makes escalation fast. That's Walters. 1NC4, no comforts. It's about material security guarantees, and Trump is just a blip. They dropped an independent impact. Power projection caps all conflict. Strength dissuades all wars and promotes democratic norms. Check existential threats. That's key. U.S.-led order solves climate change, migration, AI, emerging tech, and war. That's Johnson. A hedge does not cause prolif. Their evidence is garbage. It says undisciplined allies could prolif, but the plan has zero impact on whether or not we discipline our allies. This mirrors are the Middle East and Japan. They drop Taiwan, makes Japan prolif, which is Easton, and the plan has no effect on the Middle East. Logistics solve it by destroying all wars from breaking out. Surrendering hegemony collapses the nuclear umbrella, which causes prolif. Right 20, Russia has been increases prolif, no low production, nuclear prolif, acquire their own nuclear materials, and if the hands of the United States make it, and unless experience might be more prone to action, nuclear powers and close proximity, advanced response times, and you have a great chance of spiraling into escalation. They never had a terminal impact to proliferation, so it cannot outweigh. Go to the logistics advantage. 1NC1, natural disasters are existential direct impacts, knock-on effects, civil wars are inevitable and escalate. That's Sullivan. No disaster diplomacy. A, the plan is key to it because logistics facilitate cooperation. B, it doesn't assume Trump and global tensions. That makes states more likely to compete than to cooperate. 1NC2, fish wars cause nuclear war, a resource insecurity, and border hotspots trigger entanglement and war. 1NC3, oil spills are existential Arctic degradation, perils like functioning through biodiversity and knock-on effects like oil wars and disease. That's Hussein. The status quo doesn't solve. Their evidence does not assume the magnitude and destruction of spills. Cleanup isn't bad. It just says Exxon cleanup fails, but that's because they lack logistics. T, minerals. We meet their interpretation. 1, plan text in a vacuum is the sole non-arbitrary standard that doesn't lead to positional competition. 2, both development and exploration include logistics support. That's green. U.S. Code 90. Development, exploration, including logistics support. Counter-interpretation. Development includes infrastructure and emergency response. Alaska Statute 22. Arctic development means improvement in the Arctic to emergency response after social commercial activity, research or infrastructure, military facility. Exploration means discovery of the unknown. 22, exploration, active discovery, and unexplored features of the subject in the Arctic. Prefer 1, predictability. Our interpretation is from Alaskan law with intent to define. Their interpretation is not legally precise, it's legally illiterate. Their interpretation is only defining exploration development in the context of Antarctic Mineral Resources Protection Act. No shit that a law about minerals defines exploration in the context of minerals. This is why they've omitted the full context of the card, which clarifies that the purpose of the definition is only to be about for that law. It independently says it must be for the purpose of minerals, which makes its words since plans don't have purposes. US 90, the purpose of the chapter is to strengthen environmental protection. Antarctic Board of Mineral Resource Development. Antarctic Minerals is the purpose of the chapter. Antarctic Mineral Resource Act means protecting exploration development. Antarctic Mineral Resource the purpose of which the purpose of which. 2, overlimiting. It constrains the topic to just minerals, which is stale index research. Functional limit salts. Aptly fed key to be Alaska. They also get the Arctic Council counterplan impactor and security consult politics and deterrentes, which solves their offense. Reasonability, competing interpretations cause a race to the bottom and crowd out substance. Go to the Canada counterplan. 1, firm do both its units follow on. 2, it can't solve. A, geography. Canada has no legal jurisdiction over Alaska. It's the fulcrum of global logistics. Whoever holds it when deterrence, that's Heiserman. D, capability. B, capabilities. Canada can't survive the capacity to build infrastructure. Only D facilities survive coarse weather and Arctic's unforgiving conditions. That's Heiserman. C, coordination. The U.S. is key to international logistics. 3, threatening the U.S. fails. This plank stinks worse than Cyrus and lacks the solvency advocate. They have no evidence that they'll follow on. Trump responds to it by doubling down on threatening to annex Canada. Remember when he posted about making it the 51st state? Trump says no, he doesn't want anything from Canada. Global 25, clear Canada negotiation. Non-talk for geography. The U.S. said nothing. Canada produces impossible to make it effective. In other words, no value relationship. Only taking away Trump is serious and wanting to make Canada the 51st state. The mere threat of terrorists destroys Canadian leadership, putting their government in shambles. About 24 terrorists into Canada paroxysm, which made that Trump revealability in Canada become the U.S. state. The Trump's threats to represent unprecedented diplomatic aggression against Trudeau and scrambling. Only American capabilities support follow-on via deterrence agreement. That's Scott Skillen. 3, perm to the counterplan. 4, reject international fiat. It has no resolution basis justifying infinite combos of local and international entities that distort, let, and move deficits. 5, do the plan and the counterplan over other issues. Textual functional competition is key to background and objectivity. 6, no internal. A, impact. No warrants for extinction. Multi-lap thumb fight to Trump thorns. B, all causes. Canada's in the Arctic now. Their evidence lists structural issues with engagement. One-off development does not fix. C, plan solves. It creates American multi-lap via deterrence, which is better. 7, do the counterplan. Then the plan sequencing is not intrinsic because every policy is a sequence of actions and should is an immediate ground. 8, should consider possible future events. Prefer particularly definitions grounded in stable bases are useless. Canadian middle power leadership is outdated and ineffective. Found in 19. Canada resting on the lower side. Not middle power today. We're in a what is left. The first numerous and this country preoccupied with the total Canada. One of them go another. That's special decision. Talking to the lead issue as we do. We need to work with other issues, but Asia and not assuming the U.S. want to lead. Canada is in key. Multiple other middle powers fill in. Law 19. Collectively, middle powers influence together Japan, Germany, UK, France, Canada, Suku, Australia account for 1/5 of the economies and from the production roles. Place order seriously. Australia and other links work together. There's significant exploration. Franco, German, proposal, Japan, UK, promise, India, perfect. PPE counterplan, perm to both permanent counterplan. Devolution means it mandates federal development. DOE 14 for recommends any provision by 1/2 of statutory responsibility development, governing, construction, and acquisition. It relates to itself for an object or action, not ownership. Marion Webster 25 relating to itself for object of action. Preferred, they greenlight infinite devolution mechanisms that are unpredictable. Rule everyone you see can't solve one authority. Alaska has no jurisdiction to the Coast Guard. Involving federal actors is critical to leverage agency and private expertise. 3, coordination. The U.S. is key to international logistic. American capabilities for follow-on. That's Scott Skillen. 4, rent seeking. To Connor 17 PP's case of the many wherever we design floats for instead of seeking, let's get a process developer. Instead of hard with native communities and also provision do the plan and develop equal authority to the private sector. Solves the internal prone to the plan and private public partnership, which solves. Counterplan must be textually functionally competitive. The key to research, objectivity, and remainers can't solve. No CMR and civilian logistics. Once the liberty defense industries are contracting. Trump overwhelmed. Similar agreements can't overcome his impact. No CMR impact on all causes. Content 18. Analysts are certain military included around all of the military projects rather than research personnel and there's nothing else. These references on the ground to the resources decline in morale, reflects freezes, budget cuts, and politicization. Go to the Russia politics DA. The act concludes leadership crisis are inevitable. 1 and C. The act for concentration can be ready to introduce Michael Zucchi's leadership crisis 2030 is not fully leadership turnover. Their evidence from 2021 is thumped by Ukraine. The act solves deterrence and troops. Russia will respond with direct strikes. The Arctic is not key. And we're doing the Russian public is not investing in the Russian October during taxing the domestic population has too much on their plates. Attempts to be to the numbers by diminishing returns. Legitimacy is cooked. Declining global presence. Ukraine proves that's their evidence. Putin is resilient. Roland 24. Summer Cove article. People the brain for the gigs and like those that improve regime is in never realized that you need Gorbachev only 6 years fighting Afghanistan and corrupt Putin's centralized. The plan does not send a signal to the public. Only military planners. Putin conflicts with gray zone tactics, not war. Elmer 21 Moscow diversion tactics to pull the gray zone and pulling neutrals below the professional warfare. Russia uses presence to solidify legitimacy. Angle 24 aimed to Western sentiments of the unified people refuse to use Western values as part. Because our global xenophobia forces as identity resonates with the populist bill support for the Kremlin. Go to the Russian relations aid. No link. The plan doesn't increase presence but makes current operations more effective and efficient through other means. Greenland thumps and zaps uniqueness. King 25. And it'll talk about war Trump telling Greenland there are no words on American take over Moscow Putin consider finding designating foreigners as a staging area for complex. Day non-intrinsic, you can do the plan and increase our cooperation. No internal link. Arctic is the cornerstone of broad relations. Other hotspots include sanctions and Ukraine overall and presence is inevitable, but it's a question of effectiveness. Paul 25. Russia actively made an effort to show display force maintain the present for Soviet talent situation and threat raising no Russian arms racing. Demobilizing people arms is disadvantage from Moscow, unlikely to start mass increase war heights without money because the launchers upload more aid to war economy and ability to expose the integration of living, but to pursue nuclear arms, so we've been maintaining conflict and cost is high. Arms control fails. Edward 45 been violating arms control agreements for more global violations of meaningful arms control is far-fetched and nuclear discussion coupled with China. Regard to willingness is weakness against verification as espionage. Afterwards, assurances staves off global waves. That's us. Go to the K. Framework. Evaluate unique links to the consequences of the plan. Muting a municipal when you see destroys fairness and clash. If it is a game in contestation turns all sovereignty and their standards. Extinction first. They must disprove the case to when it's constructed. It's the largest and most irreversible impact, so it's first. Turns their offenses. It concludes indigenous resurgence. Perm do both. Either the overcomes the links or cannot overcome the status quo. Forwarding the sovereignty claims in the name of collective future. Within debate, order the factions, colonialism, waste 15. Constantine impeachment. People love the victims of getting established. Society as people return to the capacity. Come home cannot be. Separate constructive research rights and public capacity for night. Reproduce and citizens of all life regardless of relative indigeneity, race or gender. Market race or gender. The all cancel. People will propagate extinction regardless. Con is a voting issue. No risk options skew the tweets. See the debt clash and fairness dispose off their offense. Perf con is a voting issue. They continue extinction rhetoric.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
All right, I want to start on topicality. The exploration interpretation says anything that discovers the unknown. What in the Arctic is unknown at the current time?
Well, how would I know that?
Right, so what apps can you write about something unknown? Like, how do you quantify what is unknown?
Well, so things include scientific discovery of unexplored areas or scientific investigations to uncover
So
new
what parts of the Arctic are unexplored?
What parts of the so I can't tell you like this particular coordinate of the Arctic is unexplored, but it's a vast area.
Okay, I'm
and
mainly
much of
asking
which
like
we
what
haven't
apps
been
are
to and
allowed
haven't
under
conducted
this.
scientific examinations.
Okay.
But if your argument is like it's just not a very big area, that just sounds like a reason that your limits DA is.
Well, I think your interp artificially gets rid of an entire part of the topic. But
So
development
yours is
interp
like we only explore minerals,
development
which
interp
seems a
says
lot
that
more
Arctic
constrained.
development means improvement of a facility to aid in development. Seems a little bit circular, no? Like, how do you determine what does aid in development if the definition of development means to aid in
So
development?
you've omitted the context where it explains what development means and gives examples of the kinds of infrastructure developments that are included in our interpretation.
How do you determine the purpose of those projects? Like you said on T that mixing burdens is bad because it's bad to have to evaluate
your
the purpose.
interpretation defines it as being for the purpose of mineral extraction. Our interpretation doesn't say that development needs a purpose, but just defines the kinds of activities that are encompassed under the word development.
So it's not exclusive?
It is exclusive. It has a list of
Okay,
what's
okay.
included in development and says those things are development and things that are
Yeah,
not
okay,
listed are not development.
Canada counterplan, the perm do the counterplan in the plan. Can affirmative teams choose when the plan is implemented?
No, but you've added the element of sequencing to the plan, so it's a logical extrapolation.
Okay. Russia politics. AF solves missiles. How does logistics prevent missile strikes?
Sorry, what's the question?
The warrant on Russia politics that AF solves missile strikes. How do logistics solve that?
No, so our argument is that it constrains the mechanisms by which diversionary war would occur and makes it less incentivized for Putin to use
in what way?
diversionary tactics in response. For all the ways we talked about in the 1AC, it does things like fortify logistical pathways and supply chains to make war more costly and difficult.
The Heisman evidence says the things that are lacking in our current logistics in Alaska are drinking water and wastewater and energy.
So it says those
How
things
does the-
among others, but you need
the other
those
ones
things
are
in
like
order to
highways,
launch a war.
ports,
A large part of
bridges.
the reason that Russia had to stall its initial invasion of Ukraine was just because it had poor logistics, and
Okay.
they didn't have things like water or food or toilet paper. So logistics
relations
are
dissent.
extremely important
Why
to
is
preventing
Putin-
the outbreak of conflict.
Why is Putin worried about Greenland?
Our evidence says that it's an example of U.S. encroachment in the Arctic.
So Putin is worried about that, right?
No, but if he was, then that
So
would
then
certainly
we
thump the
can
DA.
scratch the card because he's not worried about it?
No, we've said that insofar as Putin is worried about U.S. presence in the Arctic, threatening to invade an Arctic nation is
Okay,
way more
okay.
significant than the plan.
Cyrus, correct?
No.
No? So, before Cyrus gives this order, I would like you to just think about like what the negative block should be post this 2AC. Like what would you do, what would you kick, how would you split it up, and divide it amongst yourselves. Thank you, Cyrus, for taking that opportunity away from discussing it. Because he decided to try to be involved.
Okay.
Alright. you give the order, Perry.
Okay. The order is T Minerals,
Yo, we don't need this food.
then the Canada counterplan, then the PPP counterplan, Extinction K,
Yo.
then Advantage 1, Advantage 2.
Deterrence and logistics, thanks. They have names. Does anyone need that again? Okay. Eno apparently needs it again.
Okay. T Minerals, Canada, PPP, K, Deterrence, Logistics. Okay. Reject plan fix and evacuate and expose limits, explore the Arctic by joining the G Squad as topical. Green lights vagueness. Every plan becomes arrest, crushing detailed analysis. In fairness, presumption, they said military logistics are key. They don't mean says development of the logistics, not the Arctic. Positional competition loses to theory and norm solve. Functional, we meet is zero. The next line says the purpose must be mineral extraction. Inserted in the document. Now, development and exploration must exploit, identify, or evaluate mineral deposits. That's U.S. code. Reject Alaska statutes. Infrastructure is meaningless. They can build any base, invest in new tech or transportation for any purpose. Anything can be a quote facility, and anyone is impact can be a quote emergency that justifies action. Limits outweigh expanding the topic over such as research and causes prep asymmetries. Independently, it's circular. That's not a definition. Now, on presumption. Insert 2EC Alaska Statutes 22. They don't mean exploration because logistics is known to the U.S. because we know how to build bridges. That's what the F does in cross-sex. No predictability. They define infrastructure development. And the second card says, quote, might be, our card is good. It's the only government definition out there. Here's a new one. Development means activities which relate to us. Following discovery of oil and natural gas. That's CFR 16 preferred. It has intended to define from the government. Limits outweigh one. Norm solved, especially with 200 people watching. 2, unpredictability inevitable. Linguistic and researchers practices diverge. 3, turn an unlimited topic is unpredictable. 4, it's unworkable. There's no threshold, and definitions are never perfect. No mixing burdens links to them because improvement is solvency based, and the functions are clearly outlined. Over limiting is 0. Coal, iron, gold, copper have strong advantages like econ, supply chains, manufacturing, etc. It's good. FR and arms sales proof. In-depth debates. Maximize portable skills. No functional limits or generic compel skill debates. New cases can't be fact checked and will be empirically beat them. States lose to preemption from a red court. They get jurisdiction, modeling, and signaling. Concede framework. Zero security. Judges take consult. Trump has no PC and deterrence or impact turns. Won't apply to small changes. No reasonability. They are not done above. T is substance. Teaches legal engagement. Invites judge intervention and arbitrary competing in terms causal based on the top by encouraging best practice. Canada. It solves the whole case. Canada threatens all co-op with the U.S. in exchange for the plan, but the U.S. agrees solvency is absolute. Use efficiency, deficit plus cost extinction, judge case, we lose offense. It's most logical and fair. 2EC1, do both must be simultaneous. Adding sequencing is intrinsic a voting issue. For net ground, that ruins a net benefit. 1, hollow threat, recommending a pre-existing policy. Looks incoherent and shadows leadership. 2, bandwagoning 9, 20, bandwagoning effective first, independent foreign policy, middle policy, in line. With U.S. aligning against outside Canadian policy, U.S. key factor striking independent policy, Canada delegating independence to U.S. imperative policy. Vote independence of police, Canada. First, 2EC2, group unilateral deficits will kick the plank that is Canada to the plank themselves. Winning follow-on below. Access is U.S. key. Now, the U.S. will say yes. 1, diplomatic maneuvering. Allison 25, Canada. And Carney use flattering friendly with Trump 50 stage respectful refugees and countries model for all those flattering say Trump will Carney will be about a part of your transformation. Trump wanted to get Canadian age side like him convert. Canada's friendly, not only Trump yet. Is stepping up. 2, content. Republicans eat up the plan. Ages 25 extra to get the Senate transmission. These sort of LS offer the security benefit pledges of the president. What is great guys rewards new assets? It strikes at the heart of the MAGA core at Mickey 326 at core Trump ambitions. There's room for benefit as well. Please just this is conventional use of the monitor what is the record of the project of the Trump the MAGA NCK approach that use interest in Alfred companies troll fiat is fake vote negative presumption. 3, political incentives stating no forfeits. A cornucopia of oil, gas, vehicles, and food prices for every item would shoot up, enraging Trump's electorate and corporate backers. It takes missile defense resources and broader enforcement off the table, forcing Trump's hand. Break B-25 truck. Crack foundation for the whole South not disappear. Canada strike leverage against the U.S. Realize Canada not going to natural resources critical border vital interest of the U.S. Specifically, the Golden Dome Dash 523 Trump missile defense can't build without Canada. Whether realize not Trump signing himself to need the shield and gives Canada new leverage. 4, off this change. At worst, the U.S. follows on in 3 years. No evidence is now is he threatening to annex Canada is a neg warrant. The Cameron fiat's Canada never backs down and never gives up, extending a political dogfight until Trump eventually caves. Gilberman does not assume planned popularity, immigration, or missiles. Those statements appear rhetoric to stoke nationalist fervor, not genuine diplomacy, and the Bowdoin evidence concedes saying yes plays into Trump's narrative, so we'll explicitly concede the full weight of that evidence. 2EC3, do the Cameron severs USFG voting issue for neg ground and Af condo. 2EC4, international fiat is good. Counter we can only fiat Canada and never fiat the plan. 1, neg flex. 0, linking Negus styles in the vast and no controversy. Requires multiple options. 2, negation theory. It's a genuine opportunity cost. Exclusion is arbitrary and illogical. 3, education acts with the 20 meaningful debates from their own articles longer particular importance. 4, no offense. US keys say no, and other theory like object fiat check the alt is process slap that competes. Now should. 2EC5. Other issues are intrinsic. Counterplans compete off a functional load. 1, ground plan specific. Eliminates all generics and impossible burden against new and tiny cases. 2, word games text can be rearranged at unpredictable functions. And filler words like offense, crushing policy analysis and clash. 3, logic ignores syntax and context. And remove ban the plan. Key to predictability and skills. 4, infinite regression. Function and text are arbitrary. Any intrinsicness snowball state engulf. Whatever we did, do both things as applied. Development of the Alaskan Arctic is functionally identical. It is not military, which makes follow-on less likely. Done above. 2EC6. Canadian middle power. That weighs the terminal impact is dropped. Leadership reinvigorates multilateral institutions to guide regulations on nuclear confrontation, trade, environmental breakdown, terror, and pandemics. That's Crane. Yes, extinction. Global breakdown is good enough. It turns every case in back. Trump thumbs is our point. Canada must fill in the void left by U.S. leadership. Now, Canada is pulling back from the Arctic. Code 20 feet. Canada offered the promise of presence over all standing sufficient capacity inadequate connection, education needs, reform, food security, health withdrawal from Norway, Canada, to pare back speaks volumes. No structural issues or evidence is asserting leadership overcomes past reluctance. The aft is not solved. It expands U.S. leadership, crowding Canada out. That means the net benefit is a disadd to the plan. 2AC7, perm to the plan after the counterplan is intrinsic. It adds temporal separation between the counterplan and the plan. Even if each can be delayed, that's new sequencing fiated by neither. Policies are not immediate, does not assume debate or passage is instantaneous. They don't specify what comes after, so error neg and strike this permutation. Reject it, intrinsicness destroys all ground. They can specify normal means to spike every decide. Should is immediate, some is 94. The answer is not fair. Must be legal. Should must be in, must at the present time immediate. Preferred delay justifies science fiction, destroys timely education, and spikes ground. Theory and time-sensitive advantages. Check abuse. Predictability was beaten above, and our evidence cites legal precedent. 2AC8. Fadden describes the status quo, asserting leadership in a few relevant capacities in the Arctic where it vitalizes Canadian influence and leverage. That's Crane. Canada is effective. Gillies. 19. Canada practices military diplomacy, soft power, company furious criticism, University of Minnesota, Canada. Is an definition of even Kurdish organizations support global order, Canada maximum influence through good relations, specify exaggeration, improbable rival to letters, only way human influence or world war important score multilateral solutions, specifically for AI regs, Lebanon 25, Canada leverage partnerships, building against given details, critical narrative, global standards for fragmentation, because of other global AI risk, collectively Canada, balance position for sustainable leadership, unprecedented opportunity for core exact for bodies, bodies may follow. Otherwise, extinction, SA 22, voter race, Lebanon economic border, define AI last laws, society adapt after policymakers, update laws, enabling guardrails and legal certainty, access to accident chances, 80% natural selection, high cost of criminal access, just security, security, scam, and bioweapons more helpful and easier. 2AC9, Canada is key. Abundant natural resources, lack of historical antagonists, alliance membership and geography make them ideal. That's great in their cards as other middle powers exist. Nice FYI, but it's not that they're effective. PUDP counterplan concede the perm, reject the argument of the team, and that it can be an object, which causes multilateral AFs to destroy counterplans because AFs are spiked by 192 factorial. Extinction K concede the perm, reject the argument of the team. Condo is good. 1 neck flex, they speak laugh. Last time infinite prep the topic sucks, multiple options are key. When 2ECs morph and sandbag offense, 2 info processing, forces quick thinking and smart time allocation, 3 arbitrariness, no rest basis causes goalpost shifting that kills flash, 4 logic, counterplan bad does not prove the plan good, impact at above 5, not specifying aging green light sandbagging and spike, disad floating, issue for clash, no offense, diminishing returns, checks, straight turns, and skew inevitable, this was bad, no consensus and added playing source terms, deterrence. This half is 0. Cross-X describe the half as building bridges and disaster management. That's it. 0 solvency for anything. No Taiwan war. Scholarly consensus that assumes military, political, social, and economic factors show military analysts inflate the risk. Semiconductors make China risk overs and would damage Xi's economy, and Xi needs utmost confidence to pull it off. That side out. 2EC Warren is, quote, not true because our evidence says so. That's it. No new one of your answers. This scenario is 0. Never trust shrunken text. Xi uses coercion, so invasion is unnecessary. Insert 1EC Easton. And invasion is in response to U.S. regional presence. Insert 1EC Harris. Arctic 1 escalate war games and empirics. Both predict cooperation, not conflict. Treaties and supernatural bodies. Offset militarism and recent events like COVID and Ukraine bifurcate escalation that filter. Drop every warrant. Status quo military exercises solved. Insert 1C Borland. Revisionism is wrong. Column 25 versus policy. Revolves around defense escalate as well. User responses to Russia to emphasize defense social. Extension NATO special challenges to Russia. Historical participation on control. Operating in complex environment, especially in the Arctic. Coben 25 Finland is left to Russia and circle NATO Syria. Level common technology to hazeless secured government Russian super NATO activities. Confrontation. No US-led order impact. Ricard is no terminal and relies on winning an internal link to war. Trump circumvents. He never regulates AI or controls the climate. He destroys hegemony. Baker 25, we can say hegemony coming to an end, erratic policies, reviewed as well, credibility is, quote, shattered, insert 1C DOS 25, hedge causes prolif, it encourages reckless behavior, and adversarial failure of US power, which motivates arms seeking that the border of the plan does spill over because they said key to all assurance, right? Does not assume more warrants, and is thumped to kingdom come, yes, impact that's 1C DOS, advantage to, no nat disasters, impact, Deepwater Horizon thumps, and they're inevitable globally, and hundreds of incidents disprove American catastrophe, no fish wars, it's not the sole cause, trade strategy, and iron matter more than fishing stock, so the studies are overly simplistic, say it's a world sovereignty to violate easy and pursue diplomacy. 8 minutes. Okay. We have like 7 minutes.
You should write that down.
I'm good.
Okay. First question
Question on Perm du Boat. The name Poor Evidence says middle powers synchronize with the U.S. to, quote, maintain a united front in international affairs. I'm confused where you think this evidence says that alignment is bad.
No, it says that that describes the status quo. It says where Canada sort of bandwagons with the U.S. and they do the same thing at the same time. It
No,
makes
it's
Canada
saying
not
that
look like a
they do
leader
that to
internationally.
synchronize and build alignment. But I have another
It
question.
says the status quo
This
is that which
evidence
fails.
at the end says Canada has to balance strong economic and trade ties with the U.S. I'm confused why cutting off those ties would help Canada.
Because Trump will cave in and restore all ties with Canada because he perceives them as a credible power who's willing to exert
Okay,
their influence.
let's talk about whether or not Trump would cave in. All of your evidence describing the tactics Canada would use is in the context of recent trade negotiations. Trump folded to none of those, and the negotiations ended without making any concessions. Why would they be effective
So
in this case?
Canada did not threaten to take away literally all of that. Also, this does not assume what the plan is bargaining. This,
Well, I guess
this is
in
something
the
that
context
Republican senators
of the
literally
evidence
like.
you've read, that's like they try to get Trump to agree by flattering him. That clearly didn't work. So why would it work in this case?
Okay, so that's not all the counterplan does. It is not just flattering. It means, look, the economy would shut down. You get no more oil from Canada, no more
Wait,
gas
sorry.
from Canada, no more natural
Our
resources.
economy would shut down. We will read evidence that says 75% of Canada's exports go to the U.S., but the U.S. only exports a fraction of its goods to Canada.
Yes, Canada
Why is
stops
that true?
exporting all of that to the U.S. This was a one-and-see plank. Canada literally stops engaging with
Okay,
the U.S.
but I
in
guess
every
in the
possible
case of like
multilateral
oil,
arrangement.
we consume way more oil that's produced here at home or in the Middle East. Canada is just a
Well,
fraction, so why does that matter to us?
Okay, so it's not just oil. It is the U.S.
What,
still is a
cars?
manufacturer of yes.
Would people in America
Cars,
be mad if
food,
we had to
gas,
produce
etc.
more cars domestically? Isn't that what like the whole campaign was about?
Well, no, it's decreasing prices. That's the whole argument. It means that prices massively increase.
What
which tanks
evidence
the
have you
economy.
read that's like it would increase prices and also more importantly,
Well, it would decrease demand.
Trump
which decreases
cares about prices? When did he care about prices?
It's
in the
almost
context
like he
of all
based
the
his
trade
entire
he's imposed
campaign on
every
I will decrease grocery prices and energy prices,
And then
which
they
all
all
of
went up after the tariffs that have not been rolled back on any
yes,
country.
so Trump
why do you
thinks
think he
for
cares
this
about
reason that he
prices?
will lose in the midterm, which is why he
Sorry,
can't have those
so
shoot
he
up by like
thinks like
threefold.
losing the trade from one country would matter when the
Well,
price
it's the
increases
biggest
from
country.
every
It's the
other
biggest.
country didn't matter
It's
to
the
him?
biggest importer in.
Okay, this topicality, CFR says development means discovery of oil or gas. Oil and gas classically are not minerals. You've read contradictory interpretations. Can you reconcile that?
Okay, so disagree. It's activities. Well, okay, we've
Wait,
combined
you
the interpretation.
disagree? Like second grade science, you know,
No.
minerals not the same as
So we
liquid
discover
gases?
minerals after the discovery of oil and natural gas.
Wait,
or natural
sorry,
gas.
what
We've
evidence
combined the
says this?
interpretation.
This evidence is like it's gas and oil. Those are totally different from like copper, lithium, anything
Well,
you've
we
read
discover the
evidence for.
minerals after the discovery of oil and gas.
What? You've just made this up.
Disagree. It's supported by the cards.
Second. All right, here's the one in our.
All right. Order is Russia politics. Then we'll clean up oil spills on logistics. Then the relations dissat.
No, you can't get to this. We'll go back to high school time.
All right. Y'all ready?
I hope you all got the order because it's really short.
You ready? Yes? Okay.
Disadvantages of magnitude regime and splitting triggers nuclear war via internal chaos and desperate externalization and domestic crises coupled with supply chain failures. It's a direct and immediate threat to global stability that controls the terminals of H20C scenario. That's the YAP. Evidence Putin would nuke first if his back was against the wall. Lieber in 23 Russia's armed wing to be to raise the race prospect of wider war. Russian cascade triggering conventional NATO attack when Moscow could use nukes. Again, if defeating the Putin regime have no more to lose. Leaders facing defeat would cost their lives, have no option when she may appear. Army backs nuclear enemy against wall race nuclear war. Turns the case one is China. Chaotic Russia removes a buffer against NATO, forcing the CCP to become more assertive and aggressive. Two is to diminish global stability collapses norms and drive security dilemmas, eroding the efficacy of U.S. leadership. Three is disasters and oil spills. State collapse removes oversight and control of national infrastructure, causing a downpour of global disasters. Four is fish shores agreements on fishing rights collapse on a stable Russian signatory. 2C1 YAP evidence is a challenge of leaders of crises inevitable, not the crises themselves. 1C Salmonka evidence says Putin secure now to disability, calm is in a circle, no coup now, but it is possible. By God 24 West 1C unthinkable appears possible. Putin show weakness. Is it growing loyalist fracturing limit threat coup likely remains low. Idea Putin could be forced out, not for prevention remains hangs and balance. Russia will not collapse. collapse now, but it is a possibility of getting rid of. In 25, equal leader of over failing standard Putin was locked 20 years back. Can collapse overnight to EC2. Deterrence only holds. If Russia could rationally calculate the risk versus reward of strikes, assuming they know U.S. deterrence posture, regime instability, desperation, override that calculus also cannot solve separatism or civil war. Russian instability causes the loss of nuclear control. Blair and 19 American security pins on ironclad Russian control of its arsenal. The risk below for departure of guards from forge food to escape weather, increase the available one-way websites that have increased risk of illicit or accidental loss from custodians, surrender, economic pressure, take open floodgates, illicit transfer, adversary Russia will not be able to control its allies. As long as they based on a healthy common West shakes and nation building, not diminish terrorist acquisition causes extinction bond in 17 millimeter studies can elude a possible. A group can make it a bomb if they got the need to mature. At least two groups made efforts of the country attack might lash out militarily with the nuclear cluster cross and conceivable missile and comments might escalate nuclear confidence and international expedition might erode group 2 AC3 and 5 all cause to incorrect Russia is winning in Ukraine Latham in 25 days Russia might cause loss loss of becoming an illusion. Ukraine is exhausted West and demoralized. All major forces have a moving in Russia from Ukraine, so their position is deteriorating regardless. Arctic leadership diffuses popular uprising rising from other issues. Bizarre in 70. Domestic politics are important, play a role whether Russia reacts to a threat. Putin investment in the Arctic as a marker for Russian national identity. And the Arctic is an important domestic issue to the national state to show domestic support and difficulties. 2C4 Arctic is key. It is a Russian public's Roman Empire weaponizing the potent symbol of nationalist legitimation propaganda. Distraction, the economic, political, and technological exposed potential of the region allow Putin to deflect attention away from domestic issue. That's the Elmore evidence. Arctic leadership is the vital internal link to controlling domestic consent. Elmore 21 Arctic is crucial critical of Russia's plans for power status region is pivotal to the Arctic is the pillar of national identity, the important tool for the Kremlin to control domestic population. U.S. dominance in the Arctic dooms Putin into the last straw. Garden in 24 Dome, the Arctic's priority for Russia. Arctic has performed a fundamental pillar of Russia's state and national identity to political defeat in Arctic. In addition to Ukraine, in addition to Brazil, but if seriously negative consequence for Kremlin's takes out 2AC8, the anti-Western backlash does not solidify his regime. Wampus and Armax read yellow. 2AC Elmore 21 Moscow strict for distracting Russian population from discounted by deciding public occupancy. Russian injustice may not work well. 2AC6 resilience is wishful thinking from Putin's PR team from Rosen's rebellion. And in airport mob in 2023 disproves stability. Challenges are rising and Putin's grip is loosening. That's a mark of evidence. Arab is highlighted in shreds. If you cannot construct warrants in the haiku they have strung together, do not evaluate the Scarlet regime is not resilient to Markov 24 battle. It appears Putin's grip is stronger than ever. Putin's Russia is vulnerable. Hidden in plain sight. Kremlin making decision arbitrary or more brittle than it seems risk crumbling overnight as its Soviet predecessor did. 2AC7 the planners matter more. If Putin's inner circle sees losses in the Arctic, will start to challenge the regime or force a coup. That's Yap. And the leading discards above. 2AC8 is another dud. Their evidence is that the gray zone tactics exist, not that they are likely reaction to Putin regime and splitting. Highlighting it's an important task to learn as a debater. And the 2AC failed. You miss important context when you're constructing made-up cynicism for words scattered across a paragraph. Gray zone tactics are escalatory. 1AC Walter's evidence explicitly lists gray area activities as part of what causes extinction. Cannot walk back this argument. Anti-Western link turn is wrong. Link outweighs the turn because stronger U.S. presence in the Arctic does remove support for Putin's regime, but anti-Western campaigns fail. The turn lacks uniqueness as well. It says that Putin relies on xenophobia and anti-Western sentiment in the score, which means there's no reason to plan increase it. But RF says that Russia losing its current ground in the Arctic would be catastrophic logistics advantage. No oil spills impact. The card never says extinction. The closest says it's catastrophic with climate change. Cleanups are unprofitable and is sabotaged by weak regs or political incentive, not on logistics. That's Bachtel evidence. No biodiversity impact. Bailey and 19 double exaggerate when limiting the loss of life in the seas. The claim that 1 million species heading for extinction may not have been exaggeration, referring to 1 out of 8 million, less than 2% of vertebrate animal species gone extinct. So the guess is ignored. Relations is that. Kick that is that concede arms control fails, takes out 1AC pro of internal and deletes any offense of the flow. No 1A or cross tap. 2AC1 was beat on increased presence. That was answered above. It's contradictory. With the entire 1AC2, when the entire 1AC 2AC2 is a green list number 1, I'll talk no game. Trump's posturing has no material effect on Putin's inner circles while the plan's dramatic expansion of U.S. Arctic presence is catastrophic for regime stability. See the 2AC's 51st state argument 2. The U.S. is explicitly avoiding Arctic personnel called in 23. U.S. Losing for race for Arctic last fire competitors. U.S. falling behind, pushed U.S. direct defunct. EWS no need to develop sea routes, did not fail, need to develop bar harbors. Settlement, transport, infrastructure, icebreakers. Increase from it and its local capacity to conquer the region to a C6. Our impact is not about arms racing, so defense does not apply.
Alright, so after a neg block, so hopefully you all thought about that. What was like your strategic neg block going after a 2AC? Now, just think carefully in your mind, what would you do in the 1AR? Would you kick an advantage? Would you like do pull some tricks? Which cards you would extend on the disad? The counter plan, topicality, and the case. Okay, so just discuss that amongst yourselves quietly. just want to hear some thoughts from people. What would you do in this 20 yards to help like post the neg block? Yeah.
I would spend way more time on this ad than not doing anything else is really good.
Okay. So you're spending a lot of time with this because nothing is really relevant after cross. Okay, yeah.
607.
Go for fish wars. Okay. Interesting. So it's all covered. What else? Yeah. Condo. Why? Okay. Yeah.
Extend we meet on TV to not engage in like that big debate.
Okay. So then we meet on T to not engage in a big debate.
Answer is respecting condo.
Okay.
I already did it, don't worry.
Who said ace back? I know you said no neck. Yeah. All right. What?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Oh, we're on.
Yeah. You all got it, right? What's the order? The order is the deterrence advantage, the logistics advantage, T minerals, the extinction critique, the Canada counterplan, and the Putin politics disadvantage.
Okay.
Do you need it one more time? Deterrence advantage, logistics advantage, T minerals, the extinction K, the Canada counterplan, the disadvantage. I'm gonna wait for
Okay, now that you heard the order, hopefully like you all's thoughts can't come true. This is Claire, give the one. Where's my red? Yeah.
Yeah, we're stealing prep. Okay. Good.
Russian collapse outweighs Arctic incursions prove Western response against nuclear begins to escalate to de-escalate and miscalculation. War games and cooperation is wrong. You can't extrapolate from empirics because Russia is ramping up aggression. That's Heiserman, Sullivan, and Boyle, and Ukraine is after. Unique disproves revisionism and conflict will spill over to the Arctic. Military exercises don't solve. They fail because of logistic inadequacies. That's Sullivan and Russia's revisionist or concedes Russia would escalate to de-escalate. So any conflict will go nuclear. That's just that nukes are defensive. Now that Russia's status seeking that's Boyle and U.S.-led order outweighs. It's a threat filter. It coalesces global solutions like existential threats like climate change, tech risk, and war. Specifically conceded it solves AI, which is terminal to Canada. So zeroes the impact, and that solves Canada impact. U.S. leadership obviates according to Canada. Trump doesn't circumvent 3 more years just to blend countries he passed, and that's right. And Trump isn't in General 25. Trump's going to be in our world leadership parade. All this from support over Trump's aisle. Trump is in our right to assessing policy statements are reached to the all country European and purchase of U.S. exports to Egypt, India, Indonesia, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Vietnam express preference for Republican analysis of clear strategy and federal deals on the Turkey family, Russian, China, bracing for tougher penalties, and hedge sales relevant research, allies, security, the U.S. nuclear problem is above the answer. Trump is good at disciplining allies, so they won't pro for retrenchment and leverage its purse. I'm sourcing regardless. There's no terminal impact. Antipola casino invasion. Answers don't throw off this logistics kick it. T minerals. One way mean U.S. code includes both development and exploration, includes infrastructure and logistics support that for activities that's a plan in the app. Coast Guard infrastructure is directly utilized and work on transportation terminals, specifically in the context of oil resource stats or work. It's specifically true in the context of their definition. We agree U.S. code 90 development including transport activities and framing issue violations are not probabilistic. They have the burden of proof, so we can never affect minerals. That block is extremely light. If it's 0 cards, so even 1% risk means you go down. You affect other sectors, makes it burden between topicality and self-esteem plans specify this will increase logistics support about the sector T. That's good. And predictability, their interpretation is divorced from any predictable analysis of development. U.S. 16 U.S. code 2462 is exclusively defining the Arctic context of Antarctic Mineral Resource Protection Act notion that in the context of law governing minerals says in the context of that law development and exploration refer to minerals, but it has zero intent to define outside of that context. The CFR a shambles. Diplomatic maneuvering is wrong, finding the opposite of flattery, and it's in the context of trade negotiations. What's our failing? Cyrus doesn't know about flattery because no woman has ever complimented him. Constance appeared to be disproven. Sorry. You must reject Canadian proposals for increased death defense. Guardian 25. You should have the proposals establish transferring on Russian, especially increased tax numbers and include the same shuttle fleet circumvent sanctions and no political incentive. And Trump will say no to everything. UNC Allison concedes this, and Trump will just invade Header 25 to Canada has been indulging in equally offenses for being perceived but not related military personalities. You retaliate with massive tariffs like he's done in the past. That answers office change following on years later since Canada gets crushed by tariffs in the interim, and Canada middle power leadership feels its bureaucratic with internal issues like international leverage and gets subsued by the U.S. Multiple other powers feel in and more effective. Japan, Germany, UK, France, South Korea, and Australia, and Canadian leadership finds inevitable lane 19 military and forces Canada little power range energy. ELCA eroded sharply found putting that direction and size forwarding is considered here 0.6 trillion in foreign service and market at foreign service, and Canada can't lead AI. The rest says they should try, not that they are dropped. U.S. leadership solves, which means there's impact to zero. U.S. and China outweigh. They made every major mode and okay, no impact to rogue AI. I'm a good 24. Hey, so there's someone who's existentially sleeping up to the right analysis. There's not at science fiction, go to the DA. No church case group trying to hegemony the soul path of classes failing from logistics, need out of Russia's inevitable, never escalates only lack of interest, feelings, aggression, not ties remain loose. Nukes is wrong, when Russia's isolated, domestic terrorism will be the first to go in collapse, which means no escalation. And 2, Blair doesn't assume Ukraine disrupts the impact versus economy shot in the military showdown, which means there's no acquisitions, have already happened. 3, no loose nukes, Mueller 20, losing footing, very honest, bomb, market bomb, and you need to zap Yap's leadership, turnover quotas, and the only card that reconcedes a tons of all causes, and the Arctic is not key, the public is not investing in the Arctic, there's too much on Russia's play, collapse of the economy, Ukraine, political war, Russian outweigh, that's all more rehabbing in the context of distraction in the Arctic, which means the answer to the national support is no longer persuasive. Number 21, telling the Arctic support of military Ukraine, Russia, public, mainly less than default for diversionary attacks and state propaganda.
You have 750 of prep. 750. While the neg is prepping, look at your flows and think about like what 2 and R you would give in this round post the 1 AR. Okay, the 1 AR is pretty good. So like neg is gonna have to like consolidate somehow. predictions are correct on what they want to go into ours. I walked around and heard a lot of different answers and interesting answers. Especially the people in the back, like Ethan, Jordan, John, and Russell. They said an interesting answer. Okay, Cyrus, go.
Okay, the order is the Canada counterclaim, the disad, and then the advantage one. Everyone go. Canada, I'm not going for it. Not sure why Claire was distracted. Actually, I might have a clue, but they dropped presumption because fiat is fake. The ballot cannot enact a plan. This argument was dropped. Punish them for not flowing, and claims do not need warrants and impacts because that would be regressive because every claim needs a subwarrant, which makes debate impossible. Guess that. It outweighs Russian regime collapse as a threat magnifier. It spirals into a deadly combination of civil war, supply chain failure, and loose nukes, each of which makes extinction inevitable. They drop that Putin would nuke first. If he perceived his leadership is threatened, he'll launch as a last-ditch resort to trying to hold on to power. That is the most immediate and direct impact in this debate. So you should evaluate it first. It turns the case. 1. China's destabilization of Russia and leaves China alone and afraid, forced to grasp onto Taiwan. There's a mean of counteracting the U.S. 2. Hegemony, global instability, collapses the rules-based order as countries are thrown into security dilemmas after the loss of a great power that makes any attempt at U.S. leadership totally shot. 1 year answers were insufficient. Just discerning logistics solved does not answer the turns case analysis. Case arguments will prove that more water bottles for the military or more bridges cannot solve the global waves of instability that are totally inevitable under the dissent scenario. Loose nukes defense is not great, just as the bombs would be hard to transport and they remain under guard, but our evidence is that under a full regime collapse, people guarding nukes would give up their post in a self-survival move. Also sets that groups need the materials to build a nuke, which overcomes the transportation argument. No Ukraine thumper dropped one in our Latham that Russia is way ahead in Ukraine because of demoralization in the West and exhaustion in Ukraine itself. That solves any thumper argument about Putin, why Putin might feel Ukraine fails, making an Arctic failure the only scenario for regime collapse. They also contain Hazard evidence that says the Arctic is used as a diversion away from domestic crises like Ukraine, even if they weren't successful, which fundamentally zeroes the case. The uniqueness extension was an underdeveloped highlight. Don't let this be the two we are. All this highlight gets for them is a brink claim that threats to Putin, and the score not sufficient to totally collapse this regime, but a blow as significant as the plan would be catastrophic for his inner circle stability. Resiliency is also wrong. Putin won't find a way to assert authority due to the magnitude of the link, which is a 2 on our flat drop. The Arctic not key is a losing strategy when we are outcutting them 4-1. Our evidence is the Arctic's promise of technological, geopolitical, and economic superiority make it a prime target for Putin and the Russian regime. That's the 1 is the Elmore evidence. The 1 in our Elmore evidence continues by saying that it's a pillar of the Russian identity and a key way to control the domestic population. The Sukhankin evidence says that U.S. dominance in the Arctic would pose a, quote, serious negative consequence for Kremlin's credibility. No one-year answer to this evidence, and it assumes that Ukraine in economic stagnation and says that an Arctic loss would be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Holding a line on 2AR extrapolation, the 1AR quickly extended arguments without warrants, so no new answers in the 2AR. Good. Okay. Whoopsie daisy again, drop no solvency. The life only builds bridges and manages disasters. 2NC flagged this as a takeout to the only scenarios the 1EC extended, which is U.S. leadership and deterrence. How does building bridges prevent Russian A2AD or preserve deterrence in the Arctic? The 1AR has not answered these questions. I asked them to, they failed, so no new answers in the 2AR. I don't care how good you think Eleanor is, because it would be totally new and I get no new 3AR. In response, you can see the case in vote neg right now. No Russia war. The entire situation is stabilizing. Russia's bogged down in Ukraine. Every empiric predicts cooperation and aggression is tempered in multilateral forums like the Arctic Council. That's our Vilcek evidence. No U.S. leadership, no U.S.-led order. In fact, they totally dropped. Trump would never cooperate over things like migration, AI, or climate change. It is terminally thumped over failing multilateral agreements like withdrawal from Paris or withdrawal from the WHO or the status quo. And the card never lists any existential scenario. I'll concede AI demons, which takes it out. Warming is taken out by adaptation. It's millennia of scientific consensus agrees that it's real, not that it causes extinction. We can move upwards to places like Canada or Russia and just live there. And then finding a way to explain why migration causes extinction would certainly be racist. Concede no AI impact, which takes that out. Revisionism is false. Number 1 is empirics. Nuke strategy is defensive because they will only attack in response. Control. Our evidence has official statements that says NATO is aggressive and Russia perceives the current security dynamics as complex and they don't want to take over the world order. Our Komen and HOSA evidence sets Finland and Sweden left Russia encircled and their inability to secure infrastructure dealt massive blows to their confidence, which was hastened by LNG2 development, which also was not answered. Now, hegemony is conflict driving. To drop the security umbrella causes erratic behavior. Countries feel free to do whatever they want because backlash by regional neighbors will be condoned off by American muscle. Countries become fearful of U.S. power, which motivates acquisition. That's Porter. Empirics are apt. U.S. basing in the Middle East drive Iran closer to nuclear weapons and saber rattling in East Asia. Thus, no go to race for the bomb. Trump thumps. He withdraws from thousands of multilateral negotiations, already threatened to pull out of NATO, slashes defense spending, and tweets isolationist fervor on the daily. That's Baker. Only our evidence is conclusive from a professor of foreign policy that says hegemony has, quote, come to an end. So there's no way that building bridges bridge can there's no way that building bridges can solve any of that, and any risk of our offense outweighs.
Okay. Now, after the 2NR, think about like how we're gonna approach this, how Eleanor's gonna approach the 2AR, right? Quietly. Do it quietly. Do it quietly, talk quietly. Don't type it in now.
military operations like the Attic and Kolbe are all logistics, and the app does prevent existential threats with the Heiserman evidence. Their no solvency argument assumes that we're only bridges, which is wrong. It's just making fun of a moment in Crossix that they misunderstood. And the one error did say that it solves it, which is lower down on the flow when Claire said logistics is key, which I'm sure you all flowed because you were flowing the debate and not paying Tetris right now. Our impact outweighs theirs. Russia is revisionist, which is uniqueness, and it proves escalation. Intentional nuclear escalation is more likely and more devastating and causes extinction way worse than the risk of loose nukes after the collapse of war. And you'd rather have a couple of rogue actors scrambling for nuclear weapons than having intentional, calculated nuclear war against the two largest stockpiles in the country. Now their defense is wrong. War games is not responsive. Games can predict whether Russia would escalate, and their evidence is outdated. Empirics do not prove cooperation. They ended Arctic cooperation after Ukraine ending the dispute resolution mechanism, but Ukraine is uniqueness for argument, and it means that empirics don't apply because Russia will open a new front to distract from its losses in Ukraine. They say defensive did not capture warrant here, but we have many, and our evidence is way better. He invaded Georgia and Crimea immediately after NATO elected not to add them, demonstrating that he responds to weakness, not perceived encirclement. Cyber attacks, election interference, and disparate info on democracies can only be explained by a desire to destabilize the democratic order, and examples like military buildup, unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, Arctic probing, and cooperation with China all came after the U.S. failed to demonstrate resolve, not after it did. Independently, Russian culture militates towards aggression. The nationalism of ethnic chauvinism of the Russian nation are incompatible with peaceful coexistence, which makes war inevitable, absent continued and sustained deterrence. Independently, U.S. leadership outweighs and controls every impact. Hard power is the backbone of the rules-based international order. Retrenchment, Greenland, revanchist conflict towards democratic norms, and causes nuclear arms trading, which erodes multilateral institutions, and cooperation necessary to check all existential threat. It outweighs on magnitude, climate change, emerging tech, revanchist wars, and rogue AI all outweigh that Johnson, Heiserman, and Key. The only answer that they've made is that Trump nukes hegemony. It's try or die, since they haven't read impact defense evidence, any of it, but they also dropped the 2AC Agrawal evidence. Trump does not ruin hegemony. His transactional style disciplines allies without isolating them. That answers their argument. The hedge is conflict driving. It says that only happens because the U.S. fails to discipline allies, but does not assume Trump, which prevents them from acting out of turn. It says that the problem is leveraging the full weight of U.S. dominance in negotiation to prevent aggression, which only Trump does. Yes, it is existential. Our evidence says that the convergence of threat poses an existential threat, and climate change and tech both cause extinction independently. No evidence substantiates the worst about adaptation. They drop the hedge solves proliferation, which is the right evidence. The security guarantee of the U.S. nuclear umbrella is necessary to prevent loose nukes and proliferation, which is the only scenario for terrorist acquisition of nuclear weapons, and is a conceded way we turn their impact independently. The case solves the impact of the DA, affecting multilateral institutions necessary to solve the fallout from Russian state collapse. U.S. can build resilient institutions to prevent leadership turnover, contain Russian diversion, and prevent terrorist acquisitions of loose nukes, which means none of it will escalate as long as you vote affirmative. Now, go to the Canada counterclaim. This is so stupid I shouldn't have to answer it. What kind of debate brain rot makes you think arguments don't need warrants? Pointing out that they never had a warrant in the first place is more than enough, which the 2 concedes to. If Fiat is fake, there's no reason to vote neg either, and you should just vote for the team that had the most org. Regardless, they conceded framework in the 2AC debates. Consequences. Debates just about consequences of the plan are key to fairness, which is a conceded impact, so they specifically conceded in the block, so it's a logical extrapolation for us to cross-apply it. Russia DA. The Arctic cannot possibly be key, especially in the context of the past 3 years, which has hammered Russia. Putin sent his own people to die in the trenches in Ukraine, funding his war by cutting social services, leaving Russians impoverished, sanctions battered the Russian economy, and the collapse of the value in ruble and leaving Russian assets stranded in foreign bank accounts. It's the most repressive country in the world. Russian political voices are overridden with the threat of reprisal and murder. If you vote negative, you must explain to your entire lab why none of that matters to ordinary Russians, but the U.S. building roads in the Arctic is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Spoiler alert, it's not. The Russian public has an elite has zero investment in the Arctic. It's the most irrelevant region in the world. Ukraine, their economy, democracy, all matter way more. Russians are too busy watching hockey and gymnastics to give a fuck about the Arctic military supply chains. For our evidence, Elmer says calling on the Arctic is, quote, an old trick for maintaining domestic control, but is, quote, no longer effective, and the public will no longer fall for it. It is a version, a framing issue. The Raleigh conceded this evidence in the 1NR, and it is the conclusion of the article that all of their short, blippy link arguments are about. Even if the Arctic is important, Putin uses the plan to solidify his own legitimacy. Entering Western sentiment is the one thing that coalesces the Russian public against it. The plan will be spun on the most favorable narrative possible because Russians are trapped in an echo chamber of propaganda. Putin has an iron grip on the news, media, and speech. So if the plan is bad luck, then the Russian public will never hear about it because Russian state-owned media will just censor it. If we're right about the link turn, then they will be hit with a barrage of stories about how Western buildup proves the importance of rallying around the flag. Now, lastly, I'll answer case terms. It certainly does not. It would not be sufficient to collapse the international order. Our evidence proceeds because logistics allows the U.S. to contain all of those conflicts, and it assumes the outbreak or collapse of war.